You know what a medieval siege looks like: ladders on the walls, boiling oil, a hero with a sword. Almost none of that is the real story, because for most people inside, a siege wasn't a battle, it was arithmetic. Days of food divided by number of mouths. And the deadliest weapon in the whole thing was the gate. So let's start there, at the gate. An army appears on the horizon, and the countryside empties toward the nearest walls. Everyone who can run, runs. And at the gate, someone is deciding who gets in, because getting in isn't a right, it's a decision. And it's not the one you'd expect. Watch what gets waved through. A cow? Straight in. A cart of grain? Please, come in. A man with a lute? That's a maybe, because a cow is food. You are a mouth, a problem someone has to feed for months. Inside those walls, a cow is worth more than a musician. Inside those walls, a cow might be worth more than you. Now, nobody wrote down what one ordinary person actually did in a siege. The chronicles kept kings and commanders, so we'll build one out of what we can prove and follow them in. You made it inside. That's the good news. Here's the bad news. You are now a number in a division problem. At Chateau Gaillard in 1203, a French army came for a castle on the Seine, and the countryside fled inside. By the chronicler's count, somewhere between 1,400 and 2,000 people packed into a fortress built for a couple of hundred. The walls held beautifully. That was the problem, because the commander, Roger de Lacy, did the math. He had 12 months of food for the garrison, not for the 2,000, which raised a very dark question about everyone else. Hold that thought. Because first, you have a job. You don't get to hide. Here's what the movies get wrong. Ordinary people weren't the scenery of a siege. They were the machine that ran it. Medieval military manuals actually assign civilians roles in the defense. So, your job. You haul water. Water is the entire war. A well inside the walls was often the castle's single most expensive feature, because a well inside couldn't be poisoned, and a well outside absolutely would be, usually with a corpse dropped down it. The moat, by the way, is not drinking water. It's where the toilets drain. Do not drink the moat. You fight fires. Forget the boiling oil. That's mostly a myth. The real defense of a wall was a bucket, a bag of sand, and someone putting out flaming debris with the weary competence of a man who's done this 11 times today. And when the enemy tunnels under your wall to collapse it, you tunnel back to meet their dig. Sometimes, underground, in the dark, the two tunnels actually meet. Two crews of exhausted men just finding each other. Nobody ever wrote the etiquette for that. Which brings us to the pigs. In 1215, King John was besieging Rochester Castle, and he sent an order that still survives. He needed pigs. 40 of them, sent day and night. And he was specific, the 40 fattest pigs, the ones least good for eating. He was not planning dinner. He packed that pig fat under the wooden props of a tunnel dug beneath the castle's great tower and set it alight. The fat burned, the props burned, the tunnel collapsed, and the corner of the tower came down with it. A real event in the king's own paperwork. 40 pigs versus a castle. The pigs won. So that's the job. Water, fire, tunnels, and the occasional structural pig. Meanwhile, the town is falling apart. Prices go insane. It gets crowded. The livestock came inside too. So there's a cow on the wall walk, a pig in the church porch, and no one with time to care. And it gets filthy. Filth in a packed town means disease, which killed far more people in sieges than swords ever did. But here's the twist the movies never show you. The army outside is also falling apart. They're camped in the mud and rain for months, beside their own latrines, dying of the same diseases you are. At Calais, sickness and desertion got so bad that King Edward III simply ran out of men and started offering royal pardons to criminals back home to fill the ranks. The most famous siege in English history was partly staffed by people dodging jail. Meanwhile, the total blockade leaked. Boats ran supplies in all winter, while the English swore the town was sealed. So Edward built a town of his own. Wood, streets, a marketplace. 2 towns, one besieging the other. The besieging army built the nicer one. And then, eventually, the food runs low, and the arithmetic comes back. Remember de Lacy, 12 months of food for the garrison, 2,000 mouths he never planned for. This is where that goes. As the stores dropped, he pushed people back out, the ones who couldn't fight, about 500 first, and the French, in a generous mood, let them through. Then he sent more. But the French king had heard and gave an order. No one else passes. Let the extra mouths stay inside and drain the food faster. De Lacy sent them out anyway, somewhere between 400 and 1,200 people. We genuinely don't know the number. And that gap, the uncertainty of 800 human beings, is roughly how much they mattered to the record. They were pushed out, found the lines closed, and couldn't go back or forward. So they lived in the ditch beneath their own walls, through the winter, for about 3 months. More than half died there. In February, the French king arrived, saw them, and ordered the survivors fed and freed. The chronicler had a name for these people. He called them the useless mouths. And if you want to know how large that could get, Rouen, 1418. Henry V sealed the city, a chain across the river, nothing coming in, and waited. When the food failed, the garrison pushed its non-combatants out too. The old, the sick, the poor, women, children. By the chronicle count, around 12,000 people sent into the ditch beneath the walls, expecting the English king to let them through, or feed them. He did neither. An English soldier who was there wrote it down in a poem. He records that when envoys begged for the people in the ditch, the king's answer was, in effect, a question. Who put them there? They were down there for months, through a wet winter. On Christmas Day, the king called a 1-day truce, sent priests into the ditch with food, and offered safe passage to anyone starving. The city's own commander refused to let his people take it. Rouen surrendered in January. That is the arithmetic at its worst. But if that was you at the gate, it was never a rule. It was a calculation. And a calculation can go the other way. Go back to Calais. When the governor there pushed out his useless mouths, around 1,700 of them, King Edward, the same man recruiting criminals and building his wooden town, let them through his lines. He fed them, gave them money, and sent them on their way. The same act, the opposite outcome. The only variable was the man at the far end of it, choosing to be decent. Because underneath all of it, a siege wasn't chaos. It was a system, with rules. There was even a standard deal. If no rescue came by a set date, the defenders surrendered. On that date, not before. 2 exhausted armies, signing a contract to fight again later, then waiting on opposite sides of a field for the clock to run out. It's the medieval version of scheduling a war and expecting both sides to actually show up. And the negotiators were often priests, because a priest's safety was one of the few things both sides still honored. But here's the last thing, the thing that actually decided whether you lived. Not the walls, not your courage, not even the food, in the end. The terms. And whether you were the kind of person the terms covered. When a place surrendered well, the knights and lords usually walked out with their weapons, horses, and dignity. At Kenilworth, the longest siege in English history ended by disease and starvation, rather than any army. The garrison did the same, because the winners wanted the castle, not the people. And the ordinary people? The record is blunt. The powerful kept their possessions and their freedom. The poor often lost their homes, their property, and sometimes their liberty. The terms protected the people the terms were written for. And that's the part worth sitting with. Those ordinary people, sorted at the gate, hauling the water, digging the tunnels, putting out the fires, the whole machine that kept the wall standing, were also, the moment the food ran low, the first thing that machine could afford to lose. They saved the castle. And the same arithmetic that made them worth saving is exactly what made them useless. That was the siege. Not the ladders, not the oil, the gate, and the math.